forecast for the week of March 19th, 2023. It is quite a week in the midst of quite a month. We have no fewer than 4 major astrological happenings this week. So let's get right to it. Well, we'll slow down a little bit and say, hey, how about that Saturn in Pisces, huh? I think we're already seeing quite a bit of the Saturn and Pisces energy. As I said, always happens when an outer planet goes into a sign, you get a bit of the themes on the day that it came out. Well, the Saturn going into Pisces was preceded by just a couple of days by the UN signing an agreement to protect the world's oceans. It's a legally binding Saturn agreement about the oceans, Pisces, and that's pretty significant. In Britain, we had the law that was passed that was barring Saturn migrants, Pisces, from coming in by a boat, Pisces, right? So we have this kind of, law that comes into place that's going to deal with the issue. And then we had the BBC broadcaster who he didn't protest, he just tweeted about it saying that he didn't think that was a good idea. And the BBC fired him, and then they essentially shut down the sports department for a day, and there was a big fallout from that. And that's very Saturn and Aquarius. It was very sort of reminding us of the Saturn and Aquarius issues. Also, Saturn and Aquarius issues. It's come out as Saturn left the sign that many of the Fox News journalists who had been talking about how the election was stolen didn't really believe it. And their internal discussions, they thought it was a bunch of hooey, but they played along with it because they thought that that's what their viewers would want. And that's a very Saturn and Aquarius kind of thing as well. Saturn will say, have you been telling the truth about these things, especially public things? Have you been telling the truth about these things? And Saturn doesn't care what side of the issue you fall on. He doesn't care if you're right or wrong. He just wants to know where you're telling the truth. And so as Saturn left Aquarius, some folks got themselves into a little bit of hot water there. I'm sure they'll be okay. So that's a little bit of a recap, some of the things that we've been seeing as Saturn left Aquarius and goes into Pisces. Now, we've had a very Piscean week. Last week was a very Piscean week, and it coincides with Pluto's last moments walking through the sign of Capricorn. We'll get to that in a little bit. But let's talk about things chronologically as they happen this week, because a lot's going on. We start off on Monday with the Aries Equinox. That's the spring equinox for those of us who live above the equator in the northern hemisphere. And it signals a time when the sun moves into the sign of Aries and will be above the horizon more than 12 hours. The equinox is halfway point, half day, half night, and from this point on, the sun grows in light. That's why the sun is exalted in the sign of Aries. He gets above the horizon for most of the day. So this is really the start of the new year in astrological terms, because Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It signals this beginning. It's the springtime. You can put the new year a lot of different places, but the springtime makes a certain amount of sense, right? It's when things are renewed. In the calendar, we put it really sort of at midnight, as we do like with the day. We put the new day starts at midnight in our Western system. But you can put it a lot of different places. In the Jewish calendar, it starts at sunset. So we begin in the Western calendar, we start right at the beginning of January. It's like the midway point, right around the solstice, right at the darkest time. So for that point on, the light grows. That makes sense. But now the light really dominates, and the planet comes to life and so on. So this is the start of the new year astrologically. It's a good start time for things. You really feel like things are moving when the sun gets into Aries. And just a day later, not quite a full day later, on Tuesday, we have the Aries new moon. Now, here we have the beginning of the solar year in astrological terms, with the sun going into Aries. And we follow that up with the beginning of a new lunar cycle. I always think that the Aries new moon is really the real beginning of the year in astrological terms, because it's the growing from the new moon onwards, the the cycle of the moon grows as the sun cycle expands. And it's really like this is the beginning. And they really coincide very, very closely this year. So on Tuesday, we had the Aries new moon. I would say that this time in general is usually good for sort of any sort of intention that you want to set, anything that you feel that you want to focus upon. I would certainly take a little bit of time after the Aries new moon, which happens right around midday Eastern time. I would say probably you kind of want to wait. As always, you want to wait maybe a day before you really set any intentions. I would say that really, Monday, Tuesday, as active as they are, as much as we're thinking we want to do something, do it. But I would kind of think, we're sort of, first we're at the end of Pisces. The sun is at the end of Pisces, then he goes into Aries. But the moon is still at the end of the lunar cycle, and then there's the new moon. I would say Monday and Tuesday, for all the enthusiasm, for all the excitement, I would still probably say this is a good time to be a little bit meditative, a little bit less, forcefully active on things, and a little bit more, let's see where things go, let things flow. And that's especially true because Pluto is still at the last degrees of Capricorn. Now, we're going to have a video. It'll be out on Wednesday, the 24th, Wednesday, the 22nd. And it will be on the subject of Pluto in Capricorn. It'll be Pluto in Aquarius, and it'll be devoted to Pluto in that sign, where he'll be until about 2044, at which time I will probably stop making videos. Anyways, no, I'll keep going. Maybe. What we could look at in a little bit more time sensitive to this week is that he's leaving Capricorn. Now, we saw what happened last week. As Pluto's at the last degree of Capricorn, we have all these bank failures, and the bank failures are really shaking the markets and they're threatening the economy. We've had all kinds of really significant changes over the last week. And on top of all, who told you this? I did. Not saying anything, but I'm telling you, I told you this. It all had to go down last week in the midst of that swarm of Neptunian energy with Mercury and the sun conjunct Neptune and Mars squaring the whole lot. It had to happen that we were going to have activity and a lack of clarity, confusion and commotion, as I said, and boy, did we have that. And it's going to persist a little bit. Now, those bank failures, when they were bank failures? When Pluto first got into Capricorn. And when he's stationed in September of 2008, we started to really have major bank failures. And that began the financial crisis, which really took a big divot out of the economy for a few years. Now, as he leaves the sign, very, very typical for outer planets, we have bookending events. So we had the bank failures in 2008. We have the bank failures in 2023. And if it was Saturn would be saying, what have you learned? What did you learn? It's Pluto. He's just reminding us of our vulnerability. He's just telling us, hey, look, the foundations are not built on all such solid ground. And he's just letting us know that we have vulnerability. I think we'll probably handle this one better. I hope we handle this one better. But, we saw a lot of that panicky reactiveness over the course of the last week, which is exactly what we would expect with Mars square Neptune and the sun and Mercury conjunct Neptune. So we're feeling that Pluto at the end of Capricorn throughout the week. Remember, this is a week of beginnings. Pluto goes into Aquarius. That's new. The sun goes into Aries, new solar year, new moon in Aries, beginning of the new lunar cycle. But all of these things are preceded by the end of the previous cycle. And so new beginnings are always a little bit mushy. You're never quite sure what you're getting. It's like when you wake up in 7 a.m., you wake up, you get out of bed and somebody says, how's the day? You don't know. You don't know where you're at yet. And we don't know where we are yet with any of these cycles. We don't really know what Pluto in Aquarius is about. But watch on Thursday when Pluto goes into Aquarius. Watch and see what's in the news. Watch and see what stories really grab people's attention. And that will give us a little bit of a clue of what's going on for Pluto in Aquarius. Well, actually, Saturn's time in Aquarius gave us a clue of what's happening with Pluto in Aquarius. Saturn came and paved the road that Pluto's going to come and rip up. So we already know what a lot of those issues are, but we'll get a revisit of them and just pay attention, Thursday, Friday, see what's grabbing folks' attention. That's going to be a little bit of a flag for the next 20 something years. So we have that going on. And then on Saturday, Mars, who has left the shadow of his retrograde, right? He's left the shadow of his retrograde and he's going to move out of Gemini and into the sign of Cancer, right? He's been in Gemini since like last August, since last August or early September. And if you're a Gemini, you're probably okay having Saturn out of the area, and whatever part of your house, whatever part of your chart is ruled by Gemini, you're probably kind of a little happy to have Mars out of the area. The other side of the story is that if wherever you have Cancer, then Mars is coming into that sign. Now, Mars in Cancer. Well, let's see. We're not going to give him a special video, although, maybe we should. Mars in Cancer, where he'll be for about 6 weeks, is a rather protective, conservative kind of vibe. It is Mars. It is that warrior energy, and it is directed to the clan. Right. So there's this sort of inward turning around of energy. I'm here to play defense and I'm here to be very defensive. And I'm even here maybe to make sure that the people that are in the clan are staying in line. It's a rather conservative energy to Mars in Cancer. It's the opposite sign from his exaltation of Capricorn, where, you give Mars some marching orders and he'll take it up and he'll go do what needs to be done. In the sign of Cancer, it's a little bit more of that inward turning thing. It's reactiveness, right? There's an emotionality and a reactiveness to Mars in Cancer that is not exactly what we need. Especially, no sooner does he get into the sign of Cancer than he will be in an awkward quincunx relationship to Pluto in Aquarius. Pluto in Aquarius is going to be bringing up all kinds of social justice issues and things like that. And here comes Mars in the somewhat reactive sign of, now, this is not like if it's your sun sign or anything like that. I'm just saying from the perspective if Mars goes into Cancer, there's a somewhat reactive kind of energy to Mars in that sign, a hyper protectiveness that's not great. And it's very different from Pluto in Aquarius, which is all about, bringing things up and put everything out there for the public. Mars in Cancer says, no, we don't want to do that. And so there's a little tension that goes on there. Is it going to affect you? I don't know. Maybe a little bit. Maybe a little bit. I would really look and see in the collective. This is a very big week for the collective. Very big week for us all together. It's going to affect you and me and stuff like that, but it's not necessarily the most personal week. We're just sort of looking out the window or watching the television and seeing what's going on. But that's our world out there. That's our world. That's where you and I live. This is not like the collective is not some abstract thing that doesn't exist. It is exactly the place where we exist. So what happens out there affects us. It affects our moods. Is it a week where we're going to really feel it? And some of us will feel it intensely, obviously. The moon is at the new moon, of course, together with the sun, which means that this week the moon is together with all the planets. They're all jammed up between, I was going to say Capricorn, but after Thursday, they're all jammed up between Aquarius and the beginning of Cancer. They're all held within that quincunx between Pluto and Mars. And so what we don't have is a ton of perspective. We don't have a lot of ability to look at what's going on and see things, take another perspective on things. That gets us into a little bit of trouble. That gets us into some trouble. I would also say, just in terms of, and I'm always telling you to drive carefully and do, but Mars at 29 degrees Gemini is another indication for things going a little bit too fast, a little too quickly on the roads, a little bit of little tendency to go over the speed limit. I would say with Mars at the very end of the sign of Gemini, look at that being an issue maybe on Friday and into the earliest part of Saturday. But other than that, it's not that much of a personal kind of thing. We do have the moon is going to, after it leaves Aries, it is going to go into Taurus, which is nice. Got to bump over Uranus, but that's not so bad. And then as we get towards the weekend, then we're starting to look at some more of that Gemini kind of energy, good for socializing and stuff. So lots of stuff happening in the collective, a general sense of renewal and new beginnings, some pretty jolting, jarring transitions that are happening, lack of perspective, with all of these things happening, it would be great if we had some perspective, but not so much. We'll get that maybe at the full moon as it comes up in a couple of weeks. And for us on a personal level, I would say, don't rush out for things. I would probably wait for someplace midweek and beyond for, initiating things, getting things done. If you want to hold on a little bit longer, let Mars and Pluto change signs and stuff like that, that would be okay too, but you don't need to. And it's a week where you want to watch what's going on and respond, don't react, to the extent that you can tell the difference.